Good morning. Welcome to today's Lexington Remembers interview. Our programs were initiated in 2005 by Mary Gillespie, Dan Fenn, and Jackie Ward. And we've conducted over 80 interviews over that period of time to capture memories of longtime Lexingtonians. And these interviews can be found on our YouTube. I'm Donna Hooper, and today with me is fellow Lexington Remembers member Peter Kelley. And today we're going to try, in pursuit of our interest in capturing memories of Lexington High School classes, we've got the privilege of interviewing 5 members of the class of 53 and 54 who shared events, programs, and experience. We have Joseph Bud Downey, Paul Ross, Lois McElroy Wells, Peter Wells, David Wells, excuse me, and Carolyn Lynn Culler Wilson. So welcome all. It should be a fun and very informative chance to hear of your recollections of your days in Lexington during the 40s and 50s and graduating class of 1953 and 1954. So thanks for joining us today. So Peter, before we get going, I'd like to give a little background of information in Lexington during the 40s and 50s, when it really was a transitional period. In those days, in about 1953, the population was just over 17,500. Today, we're about 32,000, give or take. And the school enrollment was 3,500. So it was a blossoming time, too, for school enrollment. Interesting, the fire department had 34 permanent men and 13 call men. We now have female firefighters. And the fire alarm system served multiple purposes. In addition to, we had the audible alarm. You found it at every major intersection, and every box had a number, but it also, for many, many years, told us about no schools. And the 3-3 alarm, which was on the top of the Carey Memorial Building, depending upon what time of day it was, it had a different message, whether it was a high school, no school, or a middle elementary school, or an afternoon, I guess, early release. Again, it was post-war development, and we had remnants, and you folks have mentioned some of this, which we'll probably get into today, remnants of some of the large estates that existed prior to the 30s and 40s. And it was still a farming community to a much lesser degree, but our farming history was still in operation. Relating to farming and animals, there was the health inspector in the department inspected 29 barns in 1953. 34 horses were examined, 135 cows, 12 sheep, and a goat, and a donkey, and amazingly enough, I don't know, Peter. Goat? Must have been with the 1,769 pigs that were still existing in Lexington in 1953.
We got to find out whose head.
We'll have to look up the goat. Route 2 was just a 2-lane road, and it had a lot of crossroads across Route 2, and 128 was not yet constructed. In 1953, we had 6 elementary schools. We had Adams, Fisk, Franklin, Hancock, Monroe, and Parker. And we had a temporary 2-year elementary school called the Center School, which we can get into. It was located in the building at 1475 Mass Ave, which spoke to the burgeoning elementary school enrollment. The high school, where you guys went, was at 1475 Mass Ave, which we now call the Muzzy Building. And it closed right after you left, so you'll get into your...
You closed the place down,
you closed
folks.
The place down.
The building didn't close. Nor did we.
Yeah. Did we remember all these things?
And in those days, too, I found it interesting. They had a dental clinic for elementary school. So there was a dentist, a town dentist, that would do dental work for kids in the lower grades. So, having given that little bit of background, any other pieces to add, Peter?
No, we're anxious to find out from these folks if they can remember anything about those
I know.
times.
That kind of just gets you going.
Yeah.
So let's start with actually during World War II. You were a young child during World War II, in early elementary grades. What are your recollections of those days, and what did you hear about them if you didn't personally experience them that might have influenced you as you grew up in Lexington too?
You gonna
41
start,
to
Bud?
45. You folks were
Well,
6 or 7, 8 years old now.
I would guess when we were that age, it was before the war was over. But I can remember my mother saving the grease for when she'd cook bacon or anything at home. But I can't remember where we took it. But
She made soap.
yeah, but we didn't use it at home. It went somewhere. And we used to crush all the tin cans.
Yeah.
Those were
And we used to,
graduate
at that
collection.
time, like, I don't know what, I call it Greenfield Farms, on Merritt Road there where the schools are now. You know,
Swenson's farm on Merritt Road, was it?
well, okay, but it was Greenfield.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the Swensons owned it. But there were all kinds of brooks ran through that they dredged or something. But milkweed used to grow wild all over there. And for some reason, we used to go collect that
The pond.
pollen and put it in like onion bags. And again, we used to take it to the place where you used to take the tin cans. And the story to us, no, we didn't know it was right. They used it for to make parachutes. It was like they said for like
Because
silk.
there's a silky.
Yeah.
the silk-
But I think
Early recycling too, because
Yes.
they made life jackets out of the
Yeah.
filling for the milkweed. Yeah.
so tin cans were recycled,
Yeah, yeah.
purposed, newspaper, rubber.
Well, at that time, the Catholic Church, at least up in at St. Bridget's, I think East Section too, and the local merchants that had vehicles were unbelievably good. Like Bill Maloney at Alex Oil used to use his trucks, and they'd have a town-wide paper drive, huge thing. I mean, everybody from every church, everybody would save their papers for months
Yeah.
and put them on the sidewalk, and they'd pick them up, and they used to sell the waste paper to somebody. But I mean, the train used to come to pick it up.
But the collection was done at the curb of each home.
Yeah.
People put it out.
Yeah, and the local merchants
Not
provided the
unlike today.
trucks, and we were the
Well, so the trash, do people just tend to burn it in their backyard? Because I
Right.
remember
Oh,
doing that as a
I
child.
remember there was a barrel behind our
Right, and you burned your
garage.
trash.
We burned it or we went to the dump.
Which, speak, Lynn, to the dump, it was not too far from where you grew up,
Yes,
right?
during the Second World War, I was in Florida and then in Boston, so my recollection is a little different. But when I moved to Lexington, to Lincoln Street, the dump was still a burning dump. It wasn't a sanitary landfill. It was a few years after that, or a couple of years after that, that they stopped burning big black smoke. But people went to the dump with their things. The garbage, however, was in a can in the ground. Remember that? And the funniest thing with the raccoons, 2 of them would come to my house and I could look out and watch them. One would push the lever down
Right.
to open the lid, and the other one would get things out. But that was collected, and I'm sure
farms.
for the pig farms.
The pig farms, exactly.
And now we're back to collecting food waste again.
Uh-huh,
I don't know where it's going, composting.
composted.
I
And
hadn't
the,
thought
and the dump
about
was
that.
kind of a social event too.
Oh, absolutely to go to the dump. That was always a social.
That's where all the
Yeah.
campaigns took place.
Uh-huh, you're right.
Yeah, the dump was an experience. Yeah, and I had forgotten about the whole business of pulling out garbage from the container. Ours was in there was a clothes yard when you put clothes on a line.
Clothesline.
Yeah, and then in the corner was completely forgot about that.
Cement,
yes.
a cement base with a cast iron lid with a little thing you could press your foot on, or the raccoon
to
could.
put, yes, to put it in, put the garbage
And it would
in.
open up.
Yeah.
And then you
So-
pulled.
And it stunk to high heaven.
Oh,
Oh,
God.
yeah,
Oh,
especially
yeah.
on days like today.
But, Paul, you're right about that. Nobody had a clothes dryer. Everyone hung their clothes out on a clothesline.
Clothes yard, yeah.
I
Well,
think
washing machines were ringer washing machines.
They were,
right?
yeah.
You used to have a bin and slosh it
Yeah.
around, and then you ran it
And
through
then
these two ringers and squeezed it
But
out.
you cranked it to run it through.
Yeah. And the laundry sink, at least in our house, was a blackish soapstone.
3 basins. A lot of houses had 2, but some had 3. And you soaked, and soaked, then first rinse, second rinse, and out
Yeah.
to the yard.
Yeah.
the other thing
Wow.
that I think people are missing, which was huge, were victory gardens.
Yeah.
Almost
Absolutely.
everybody had a garden
And was this for their own
For their
consumption,
own
or did
consumption.
was it shared?
or shared. My friend and I built a hen house, so we had chickens in our backyard, and what's his name? Had a rototiller over on Merritt Road.
Daily?
No. Anyway, he would come with his
Oh, and turn your
rototiller
turn your soil. In the spring.
in the spring.
He'd come over,
He'd do
pay him for
the
turning
beers,
soil.
the wells, and the coals. We had a group thing, and they use a rototiller to till it all up, and then we'd have a big garden.
Right.
And,
We didn't have a big lot when I grew up, but I remember Judge Cotton on Merritt Road, which is now the
Cataldos.
Cotton
it's
farm.
Bob Cataldo's
Farm.
house, yeah. But there's an apple orchard there now. But then there was a good sized field if you're facing out to the left, and whether he rototilled that I don't know, but. There were a lot of neighbors of ours used to go down there, and that's where your community garden was. Everybody had their own plot. And a lot of food was grown there.
Right, and probably shared.
Yeah.
Did you have a garden? Did your family have a garden down there, Bud?
We had one there. We used to go up there.
So the issue with growing up during the war as young children in your family was substance survival. Trying to keep in a budget and grow your own food. Opportunities at the grocery store.
Well,
Now,
and things were rationed.
What
Fair enough.
foods were rationed?
Meat,
Meat, gasoline.
Did you have tickets like
yes.
that?
I
Yeah.
think I may still have some that my father saved from many
And
years
you
in
used
my
to,
house.
depending on where you worked, or what your job was, I guess, you had a sticker on your car. There were A stickers, B stickers, C stickers. And I don't know how they kept track of this, but you could buy 10 gallons of gas this week. I could buy 3, you could buy 7, depending on what the sticker was.
So, growing up in those days during the war, a lot of self-subsistence of caring for one another and neighbors and whatever, much more of neighborly connections than perhaps we see today. But neighborhoods also kind of had their own grocery stores, right? You didn't have a supermarket in Lexington. You had a corner market or a corner store, and you had a relationship with that shopkeeper or that grocer or something like that. And you all grew up actually, you were on Farm Crest, right,
Yeah.
Bud? And you're on
Prospect Hill.
Prospect Hill. Okay, so you remember the stores at the corner of Merritt and Waltham Street, right?
Yeah, Bud and I met in the first grade when we were 5 years old.
But you had a corner store at the end of Spring Street.
Well, yes,
Yeah, I
but I
can't
think we tended to go.
Oriented toward
Actually,
Merritt
the one at Spring Street was not meat. There was no meat, I don't think.
Yeah, no,
It was candy.
yeah.
Popsicles.
Yeah, and probably.
Well, I bought that building and still own that building, Woodhaven Country
Right.
Store. It was
Store.
Woodhaven Country Store. And Bartholomew was the fellow's name who owned it when I bought it. This is in 1973, I think, 3 or 4. He was still making candy in the back of the store and selling it, along with groceries and other things. Now, Laurie's had a market at Lincoln Street and Merritt Road.
Oh, yes.
Five Forks Shell.
At Five Forks.
Now it's Sunoco, but
yes.
it was a little market there as well, right?
Yes,
And then the
there
Stone
was-
Store.
The Stone Store over there, and then apparently at the top of Oak Street in East Lexington, there was a small store. And of course, down on Mass Avenue in East Lexington, there was, I think there were a couple of them.
Yeah, there's the bottom of Locust Avenue, the big stone store. I don't remember the name, but we all knew Oscar, who owned it.
Minuteman Market comes. Minuteman, it was one of those little stores called Minuteman Market at the end of Locust Street on Mass
Oh,
Avenue.
okay, well, that may be what it is.
And there were little grocers, and that was prevalent even through my growing up.
Breslin's had one at Merritt and Waltham, and then
Right.
over by, that was the Stone Store, was Breslin's, wasn't it, up there?
Stone Store up
Stone
on Mass
Store was
Ave,
tough.
Who was the fellow that ran the
Breslin,
store?
Cedar Street.
Breslin.
Breslin,
Was it
Yeah.
Was
Related
a,
to the one
was
at
it?
Merritt and Waltham.
yeah, Breslin was an
Breslin's
uncle of
market.
mine.
And the Manor Spa was over on Bedford Street at, is it North Hancock Street? I think that goes there.
Right, Blodgett's.
Mrs.
Mr.
McPhee,
Blodgett.
Blodgett,
yeah.
yes.
Blodgett's,
Ken
yes,
Blodgett.
Kenny
on
Blodgett,
that.
yep.
Mrs. McPhee was on Oak Street.
Okay.
So that kind of takes us into, as you're getting into high school years, basically, your recollections, and Peter's kind of taking us in that direction as far as neighborhood stores. And you mentioned before about newspapers, and you could get your newspapers at the neighborhood store, and if you were there, if they knew you were coming, your name was on the paper half the time. So that was one of the major ways folks got their news.
And there would be 2 papers a day, the morning edition and the evening edition.
And the Herald Traveler, Globe had 2 editions,
Post.
Post.
Yep.
I mean, there were a lot of newspapers.
Boston
Did any of you-
American, was that was because
That
then it
was the
became the
Record
Herald
Amer-
American,
Record
right?
Right, American.
Any of you folks have newspaper routes? Delivered papers to your neighbors?
For a short time, somebody started a competition for the Minuteman, and I think they called it the Patriot, and it was free. And I delivered that fast as you could. You get paid by how many papers you delivered.
So you delivered them all to one porch.
And you delivered. We lost a lot
Come
of
and
papers,
get it.
and they didn't stay in business long.
So
But
you
Smith's
guys,
Paper Store was the central
Clearinghouse, yeah.
house,
right on Mass
Mass
Ave.
Ave.
right on
Right
Mass
there,
Ave.
and it had a penny candy. Smith's
it
Paper
was-
Store had all
They-
sorts of treasures.
They had a fountain,
Okay.
Soda
soda
fountain.
fountain.
Okay, well, Dave, that's interesting. Your folks' memory of the center, the soda, Smith's had a soda fountain. Jackie Ray's or the Theater Pharmacy had a soda fountain.
Martin's
Then-
Drugstore,
Yeah,
Martin-
most of the drugstores
Yes.
did.
corner of Emory.
And,
Mr. Tiviad's on the corner of Waltham Street,
Okay,
where the ice cream
yeah.
store is now.
And how about,
Duran's.
Duran's.
oh, sure, yeah, Duran's was the hangout for, no,
In high school.
No,
in high school.
you were not allowed to hang out that place.
Really? Duran's?
Oh, that lady that was there, Doris, did you ever work there?
No, I did not.
Oh, the girls and I, she ran like
Tight ship.
the army. You were your crisp, beautiful.
Dot Lappin.
Lappin.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, Dottie Lappin, she lived on Forest Street, right in
She
my
did.
neighborhood, and I used to walk,
Right.
but she was very friendly when I went to Duran's. 25 cents a hot fudge sundae, not a
Right.
bad
Yeah.
deal. The Rexall drugstore also had a lunch counter.
Reed's.
That was
Reed's.
Drugstore.
Reed's, Mr. Reed.
Reed.
He was one of your neighbors, right?
right.
Jaime Doodlesack, in my day, Jaime Doodlesack lived on Basket Road, but in the 50s and 60s, I thought he had.
There was no Basket Road. What are you talking
Well,
about?
that's true. There wasn't a Basket
Yeah,
Road till
that's
the
new.
60s.
Don't bring
And
up
I think he
stuff
bought
that-
himself a new house back then. So you folks, do you remember the Rexall drugstore?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
who do you folks remember running it?
Mr.
Reeds,
Reed.
the Reeds.
Yeah.
They were neighbors of ours.
Is that the same Reedy family that had the
Reed,
the clothing?
not Reed.
Oh, Reed, R-E-E-D?
Right.
R-E-E-D.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, there was
And by the way, the Smith's Paper Store, no women were really allowed.
Off limits.
That was a
Oh,
male
yeah.
soda fountain. Absolutely. I
And,
mean, women could walk in, but they would be ignored.
but
Wow.
In that same building was Douglas's
Douglas
funeral
Funeral
home.
Home.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, right?
But there was a little sort of mall area
Yeah,
too. You used to
go
walk through
inside.
these glass doors.
There was a
And
florist
there was a
in there.
barber shop. Was there a barber shop?
That's not the
A
same
florist?
building, but
Douglas
Next door.
that's not the same
was
building.
next door to Smith's
but-
Paper Store.
Because it was an alley that you went into. Smith's was on the right and
But
Douglas was on the
that's
left.
what Peter was saying. Inside that alley was some stores.
Yes.
Yeah, just to the
Now, I don't
left.
know if they were
Kind of where the Crafty Yankee is now.
Exactly.
Is it still the Crafty Yankee?
And there,
Yes.
that was
Yeah.
also a Muse, I think what they
That's
called it.
right. You're right, David. They
The
called
Muse.
it the Muse.
And they had stores upstairs around the,
Right.
Yeah.
yeah.
But so there were a number of stores in Lexington that you could go in and have a lunch at a soda fountain, soda counter.
No lunches.
Yeah.
What about restaurants in Lexington Center?
No restaurants.
Besides those.
Well, there was a coffee shop where.
Depot Square, right?
No, well, there may have been, I don't know, but I'm trying to reference Grain Mill Alley. If you face it, on the left-hand side, it would be the
Minuteman,
training
I think.
building.
Yeah.
And
That
there
was
was a
where the
coffee
liquor
shop
store.
there. It wasn't 1775 house, but I do think it was a number. And I remember because when my folks were in business, I would go get coffee or whatever. And then all of the teachers from the junior high school or the high school would be there. And it was kind of fun.
Paul, remind us of the days that your folks had the store, and we don't want to. Well, we had an interview with you, and you explained it, but just pick up on the store that your family, the Ross television, radios,
Ross
and
Stores,
furniture.
Ross Stores sort of was an iteration over a period of time, but there was television, the first television dealership in town, and prior to that, radio and radio repair, and then it emerged to larger furniture. And when my mother began her business, which was Betsy Ross Galleries, and that was a subset of the store, but legally, as far as we can tell, separate. Yeah, it was.
At one time, did your father have a gas pump there?
He did.
Yeah, I can just
Now,
about
there-
remember.
you would never have that today.
I bet the tank's still in the ground too.
No, but it was a Jenny gas station with one pump, and the genesis of that was
That's a good word.
was a automobile dealership, which was successful for a period of time, but then was not successful. And the car showroom was in a building next to it, a gray wooden building, and there was the Hunt Alley behind that. And I think the pump, I don't know how it got there, but my dad did auto repair, and one of his many iterations of, and it was a way of being closer to the customer, which no one would think about then, but that was just one more
Full
service.
service.
What?
Full service.
Yeah.
I can remember that. The thing I remember about it, you'd pull in Depot Square, and this wasn't me, but my father, getting gas.
Right.
Well, your gas thing might be on this side, it might be on this side. There was an arm that used to swing out.
Yeah.
And the hose would come in.
Okay. So the
To
arm
serve
had the
it the other
hose,
side.
depending on what side your fill hole was.
So you had car dealerships in Lexington Center too, but in those days, what transportation options did you have? And you know, what was the
Well, there was the
Bus.
bus that ran from Maynard to Harvard Square. I don't have I don't have a memory of a lot of buses, but there were local.
Wasn't it the Middlesex Street Railway?
Yeah,
Well,
Middlesex.
it was, we used to call it the White Bus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it was White Bus Company. They used to
They
go
were
down
maroon
Mountain
in my
Road.
day.
Yes,
They
it
went
would,
to Waltham too.
there was the Waltham bus from Lexington Center.
Well, the one I think of went to Harvard Square.
right.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
later
through the
on,
Heights, probably.
from Five Forks, because I took it into Boston, there was a bus that came through and stopped in Five Forks and ended up in Harvard Square. But who knows? I don't know where it came from.
Or it went through after it dropped you
Yeah.
off.
And there was the train.
Well, of course, the train
Right.
was big.
Yeah.
And the train did regular runs during the course of the day, right? I mean, it was a main means of transportation into the city. North Station even back then, right?
Yeah.
I don't know, I don't remember, I never took the train out of Boston, but a lot of guys, adults,
Oh,
took it in that worked in
The
Boston.
business.
Yeah, it was a commuter train.
Yeah.
I don't remember either.
But I don't know that it operated except in the morning and at night.
Oh.
I think if you decided to go to Boston at noon time, you weren't taking that train.
When you
Yeah, I
were at
don't-
Adams School, Paul, the train would be going back and forth. Was it go?
Help me with that. I'm
When you
sorry.
were at Adams School, the
Right.
train would be behind the school. Was
Of
it?
course.
Was it during when you were in school itself? Did you hear the train coming and going?
No, not that I remember
but there was a station down there.
down there. And then sort of more north would have been at Pierce's Bridge on Maple Street. Yeah.
What about taxis? Were there taxis all over the place?
No.
I don't remember.
So you either used your shoes, your bike,
Well, bikes,
Bikes.
or
bikes
your
were
dad
big.
to get you.
Peter is a big bike culture.
I
Everybody had a
imagine, yeah.
bike. Yeah. Well, not everybody, but that was what.
That's how you got anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
You'll have to tell me, just a name came in. Fisk's bike stop? Fisk.
Fisk?
I don't know where they were, but the name gets me.
Bike
Would
shop?
that have
I thought it
been
was,
pre the George Royal?
Oh, yeah, before that.
Oh, okay.
Way back.
Yeah, I don't remember.
Royals,
Yeah.
the bike shop. Well, what activities did you folks have to get you into trouble or keep you out of trouble as you approached your more maturing years going into the high school? We had now grade 1 through 6 elementary, then 7, 8, 9 was called the junior high. We didn't have middle schools in those days. And then after 9th grade, you started high school. You were considered a high schooler at 9th grade or at
Ninth.
10th?
No,
Okay.
10.
So
10th, 11th.
freshmen, juniors, freshmen, sophomore, junior, seniors.
No, no freshmen.
No, that was at junior
10,
high.
11, 12.
Oh, okay, that's what I thought. So
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
just 10, 11, 12.
Yeah, it was in the same building. You
Same
gotta
building.
remember that.
You just walked
Same
from one end to
dining
the
room,
other.
Same gym.
Did you ever interact at all, or you just kind of kept to your
You weren't
own?
allowed to go in that other half. When you were in high school, you couldn't go back into that.
That curtain would come down.
Once
I
you
mean,
passed through the junior high, that was it,
Nothing.
right? In our
Well,
pre-discussions
you
for
asked
this,
earlier if we could remember things from our youth. Will we get immunity if we bring
yeah,
some
no,
of
no,
these
no.
things up?
Statute of
statute of
limitations.
limitations is not gone by, but they are still wondering about.
I remember
things.
that in high school, in the gym, the curtain, there was a big canvas curtain, and the girls were separated. And then we would climb ropes as an activity. And invariably, I would be in the middle of a rope, struggling to get to the top, and the curtain would go up. And I would just,
So your time was up, huh?
I would just want to die.
That's okay, I could never get off the
Interesting. Paul,
ground so
interesting story.
badly.
But to go to your
Well, Bud
question,
was going someplace too.
to get to your question, the Reservoir on Merritt Road
Okay.
was busy in the winter. We did a
Ice
lot
skating.
of skating. You can't even skate there anymore. I don't think
No.
anybody skated there
And
this
they
year.
lit it at night, wasn't there a
I
spot
don't
lit?
remember lighting it, but I
No.
remember the snow plows coming down and plowing the ice so that we could skate. The hockey team did some practicing there. They also did at one point out behind the new high school, I
Down
call
on
it.
Park Drive.
Yeah, on Park Drive.
Now-
But that was big. And then the other thing was in the summer, the pool, the Lexington pool.
huge.
Good point. Now, the pool was, that pool, which was in the 30s and served the town 30s, 40s, into the 50s, probably into the 60s before that new complex was
Yeah,
built.
yeah.
There was a wading pool and then a big pool. Everyone called it the big pool. And there was a diving board on the big pool.
Yep.
Right. And a
Low board and
bathhouse.
high board.
Yeah, low board and high board. You're absolutely right.
And you know what the depth of the pool was?
About 12 feet.
8.
Ouch.
8.
The deepest section was 8 feet.
8 feet.
Whoa.
And when I was a lifeguard and a teacher down there, and the guy came up and was showing off, lots of young gals were around, and he was doing fancy diving. And he went up, and when he came down, he realized he was going to hit the board. Oh. So he pushed himself off and went in head first.
Oh, God.
And when he came up, he had a bloody mess on his forehead. So I took him to Doc Harrington's.
Oh, sure, right on
And Doc
Mass
Harrington
Ave.
says, "What's his name?" Yeah, and his name was David Wells Bright. And Doc Harrington said, "He isn't too bright, is he?" Well, I'll never forget
break
that.
His neck.
And
This fellow was David Wells?
David Wells Bright was his name.
But your name is David Wells.
My name is Frederick
Oh,
David
okay.
Wells.
Well, that's a
Junior.
difference.
And the brighter light.
He was
And you weren't
no
that bright
relation.
anyhow.
He was no
brings up-
relation.
That brings up a point because we had several people who were sort of legendary in the time, like Doc Harrington. I wonder if there's some others that we remember. That
Oh, Dr. Crumb.
Dr.
He
Crumb.
was
Oh,
the,
okay.
he was the athletic.
If
direct-
a kid got hurt or anything, you went to the doctor's office. You didn't go to an emergency room.
Yeah, yeah.
I can, remember at one point my brother went through a storm door and, kind of sliced his arm. But you simply didn't, you just found a doctor.
Right.
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 So,
And they were
Oh,
there.
Doc
and
Harrington.
they were available.
Right, they were in their office.
Doc Harrington, and his family still lives there.
Nancy.
Nancy.
She was a classmate.
She's a classmate.
Oh,
was
she was.
class of
Oh, okay.
53.
Ford
I
is her
think-
name.
Ford.
Forg.
Forg.
F-O-R-G.
Yes, right, she's still there.
Yeah.
I want to pick up on something we talked about on our preliminary chit-chat. And I think, Paul, you called it the butt wall. When you guys left school,
Yeah.
you would walk perhaps downtown or at what is sort of the Russell House in those days. It's Russell Square now. But you spoke about how as you approached or went by the butt wall. What was the butt wall?
Well, the butt wall was a wall. It was from
Stone
one
wall,
of the. I'm sorry.
It was a stone retaining wall.
Stone retaining wall. Oh, how elegant that is. A stone retaining from the driveway at the high school to the end past the Russell House, and it's where the ruffians would smoke. And you would just go, I would just walk by and hope that they didn't know I was walking by.
You were invisible.
So, I don't ever remember more than 10 or 12 guys at any one time, but in that period, smoking was considered
Being grown up.
cool.
very cool.
Being grown
Everybody
up.
did it.
Oh, sure.
Not everybody.
Big smoking years.
But those kind of people, and
Those guys.
yeah.
No, those
The tough
butt
guys.
smokers.
There were some prejudicial things. I think that's a word. I was thinking of people who were taking business courses or the non-college group, and that very often were the people doing that were considered less, because the college kids were prima, and that was a very distinct, at least in my memory, that was a very distinct
And then,
behavior.
Not all the girls at that point went to college. Some of them went later after they had their kids, but don't forget, people got married in their early 20s, if not before. And of course, there was no birth control, so before happened often. So there were girls who certainly took AP courses, so to speak, and went to college. But there were others who were either, the careers for girls at that time seemed to be school teaching, nursing, and secretarial.
Secretary.
Those were what were acceptable careers.
But part of the school curriculum for girls was home economics, and learning all the basics of running a home. And that started actually in junior high, or was it high school?
No, I think
that
junior high had some of that.
had some of it.
Yeah.
And for men or boys, It was
Shop.
shop.
Wood shop,
Metal shop, wood shop, and mechanics. Did they teach
That's
automotive
all
mechanics,
no.
or was that
No,
an
it-
option?
If you wanted to be an auto mechanic, then you had to go to Arlington. You went,
Oh, through their high school, you mean?
yeah, you went to their high school, or Waltham,
Waltham
apparently.
Trade School,
Yeah,
which I think was the
And-
predecessor of the Volk schools.
yeah, and they had good reputations, Waltham and Arlington, you know, if that's what you wanted to do.
Not to make too much of this, but 160 kids is what we had.
Yeah.
Let's say
Graduate,
half
yeah.
and half.
Graduating, okay.
And we had so many activities, sports is certainly one of them, that was a very inclusive activity. You know, you didn't, on the football team, you didn't say you're a shop guy and you're a
Right.
Yeah,
college.
It
you
was
know.
the activity that was the focus.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very, and we had all kinds of music things and plays, theater, and so,
Lots of things to keep you busy amongst your classmates and out of
Exactly.
trouble.
But the
Out of
other
trouble.
thing was, you found that there were football players that sang in the chorus too,
Right.
which you're not as likely, I think, to see now.
Okay.
But I thought that they did.
Real diversity
Yeah.
of interest.
are you talking about me?
Yes.
But what
And-
David's
and
saying,
me.
right, there were so few of us that if you wanted to keep activities going,
You had to try
Let
it.
us-
Everybody had to
sign
do
up.
everything. I don't want the time to go by without asking Lois
Yes.
what her memories are of when you first met your husband, David, because it was in junior high.
Junior high school.
And what'd you think of him when you first met him?
I was in awe because
Aw? Did you say aw? I just want to make sure we knew what she said.
AWE, because he was so confident, and he actually spoke to teachers, and he could make people laugh. And I thought, whoa, whoa, here's a keeper.
I guess so.
I guess so.
You go home and he's still there, right?
So we mentioned earlier, Peter, I think too, at our preliminary chats about the Belfry Club and some of the social events and
Yeah.
opportunities.
Promenades were part of your
Promenades.
Miss Merrill's dance class.
Yes.
The dreaded Miss Merrill's dance class.
I think that was, I think 8th grade maybe.
I think so too.
My mother was gonna give us some class, so we were gonna go to Miss Merrill.
So you went to Miss Mel's and she had her dance studio at the Belfry Club?
Upstairs in the
Upstairs.
Belfry.
In the Belfry Club.
Right.
But that was at the
Right.
corner of Muzzy Street and Forest
Right.
Street. It was a social club. It started in the 1890s, I think, a tennis club or something. But the space was often used for Miss Merrill. She would rent it out, I guess, and
I
and
never
run her.
knew of anybody that ever used that for anything except Miss Merrill's. But obviously it did
Well,
because it was there.
I went to a couple of dances there
Right, they had
from the high school.
the high school used.
Yeah, I
Okay.
did.
Well, when you first entered the high school in September of '53, Lynn,
Yeah.
the gym was not there, or the auditorium.
Well,
Oh, the
no,
gym was
see,
there.
I
but
was the first class in the new high school.
Okay. And let's remember how the books got from the old high school
Oh, yes, 'cause,
to the new high school.
That's the auditorium in the old high
In
school.
the old.
Yeah,
Oh, okay. Is that your class gathered there?
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it's everybody. It's the entire
Everybody.
school,
Oh, really?
No.
entire high school.
That's impressive.
Well,
It was a good sized auditorium.
probably
at
should
that
start
time.
What's that?
class, huh?
It was a good sized auditorium in that building.
Well, you know,
For
we
the times, yeah.
had, we might have had
Don't know what the.
500 kids in all three grades.
And they all fit.
Well, I'm not sure how many, but we had 160, and my sister's 3 years later was about the same, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so give or take
So
150
mine, I think, was
kids.
So that's
163.
about
something.
500.
500, yeah,
No, I came to Lexington, it was actually 52.
yeah.
So I was at the old high school for 1 year, and then we moved. And we all carried things and walked to the new high school, all excited about it. It still wasn't finished. There was an interior gym, but not the field house. But we had no auditorium at all. But we had classrooms, and, place to eat lunch.
The town, somebody was ingenious enough to realize that if you had 160, 170 kids going from A to B, if they all carried something, it'd be a lot easier to get the stuff to the new school. And that was a parade down Mass Ave and
The
Muzzy
band
Street.
led us. So,
And that was a junior-senior band, I believe, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah,
Like
I'm
you
sure.
said, you had to
Was
get
it in the
everybody.
fall, Lynn?
No,
Was
it's
it
in the
spring?
spring.
It was in the spring, I think.
Yeah, I
Okay,
think-
Yeah, it was after
you'd
you,
finished.
Oh, at
after
the end
you
of the school
graduated.
year.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was at the end of the school year.
That's great.
No, in my yearbook, there is a picture of the band leading a stream of kids.
Oh, that parade.
Yeah,
And
that
they're all
doesn't really
carrying
show us
something,
all
right?
carrying stuff because it's mainly a picture of the band.
So let's get into high school.
What-
What kind of, high school itself, we've kind of got you up to high school, and we've talked about a few activities in that. So what activities or clubs were you involved in? Like you said, everybody had to participate in numerous things. You couldn't
Well,
just be,
I just look at the pictures of these clubs and, here's that's stuff. Cheerleaders had a big club, the hockey team, basketball, girls basketball, field hockey, and then book club, discophiles, listening to records, the dramatic club, these are a lot of kids. French club, orchestra, band, glee club, boys choir, operetta, senior play, student council.
You performed in some of these theatrical productions, right, Dave?
I was,
Tell us about them.
well,
The truth. No, not the truth.
Mrs.,
So help you
God,
God.
what was her name? Mrs.
Sandberger.
Sandberger loved Gilbert and Sullivan. So she performed an operetta every year. And the final one, when we were seniors, was The Mikado. And I was.
What he was.
The Mikado.
The
you
Mikado.
were it.
Yeah. And they're still talking about it.
I said, you never got over it.
Never got over it. In fact, I went to Japan after graduation from Tufts, just to see where my home country was, from the Mikado. Yeah.
Okay,
That's a lot of bullshit.
okay.
That's a lot
Anyway,
of David.
but that
Well-
was a big stuff. I mean, I don't know how many were in there, but
It was very big. The next year, which would have been my senior year,
Right.
we did Patience, another Gilbert and
Right.
Sullivan.
yeah.
And that every year, there was one, and she was phenomenal. Her, what she turned out with the kids that she had to work with.
Yeah.
It was
You performed
amazing.
these productions at the town hall,
No,
No, no.
The auditorium at
but you
the
didn't
high
have an
school.
auditorium initially. Oh, well,
Oh,
I'm
the
sorry,
old
you
school.
folks at
Peter.
Muzzy
Oh,
had.
yeah.
There's
So
the
did you-
auditorium right there.
No, no, but when you were at the high
when
school,
I was there,
did they use
I
the
think
old
we
high
did
school?
it, I think we did it at Cary. We did
Cary.
everything at Cary.
Okay.
Our senior prom was at Cary. Our senior prom wasn't. Our graduation dance was. And we had a baccalaureate the day before graduation and the graduation. Those were all at Cary. Our senior prom, which was kind of in, I think, December, was in one of the school gyms. But graduation dance was at Cary. It was well used.
I was just thinking,
Wouldn't it-
before the Mikado, did we do the Pirates or something?
Pirates of
Penzance.
Penzance.
Yeah, the year before that, I can't remember.
Dun, dun,
But
dun.
every year she used to do a different one.
What businesses do you folks recall Lexington having, other than shops and stuff? Was there any business other than
No.
car dealers or grocery stores or something like that?
Oh, yeah.
Fletcher Ave had Jefferson Union. Okay, that was and on Oakland Street, the Minuteman Press.
Press.
Was that the press at
Building's
that time?
still there.
It wasn't making shoes back then like it did. Years ago.
Well,
It's the Douglas House now.
It's the Douglas House now, right?
Yeah.
when I moved in, it was still really farming, a lot of farming. So there was a dairy at the end of what is now Wilson Farm. There were pig farms, of course, Annapolis Idlewild was in
Idlewild,
operation.
yeah.
The Boozers there were many farms
Ricky
around.
Farm on
Schumacher's.
Waltham Street was
Right?
active.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of turkey farms? There seemed to be a lot
Yes.
of turkeys around.
There were
Not just
a
you
lot of
guys. I mean,
turkey.
I'm talking real turkeys.
We weren't the only.
Was it up off Old Mass Ave? Was there something up?
There was
There was a turkey farm
There was
way
a
out
turkey
there.
farm
Way
up
out
there.
there.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Yeah.
The old Mass Ave before
Louise
the,
Hughes' family had
well,
some
for
connection.
one-
and
Where
then
that-
Park took over. There were a
Where
lot of
that
turkeys
Miller
up there.
building
Yeah,
up at Five Forks is,
Right.
yeah.
he was a turkey, there
Right.
was a turkey farm in there at one
And the
time.
back, I think he had a lot of
Yeah.
chicken coops,
Oh, kids.
turkey farms and stuff like that.
But there were, Idlewild had a farm stand. Wilson Farm built their farm stand, I think was 52 in the beginning, they tried it. They had otherwise, all that went to the market in Boston, except they did have, Don Wilson had an egg route.
The greenhouses, where were their greenhouses?
Oh, there were
was
greenhouses
all over the
all
place.
over the place. There were carnations grown up on Blossom Street, big carnations. Where else? But
Well, there was,
Doran's over on East
Yeah.
Street.
but down on Park
went,
Park
uh,
Drive.
Park
Yeah,
Drive.
Park Drive, the
Davenport.
Jacksons had African
Oh,
violets. I
yeah.
worked in those things
Yeah,
back in
well,
the 50s.
yeah.
Was,
But on
And
the
Lexington-
Cups, Andy
Andy
Cups
Cup-
Andy
on
Cups,
Rubin
they're
Street
still
had
Still there.
gladiolas
Still
or
there.
something they used
well,
to
they
grow.
used to,
And then there was plant action
Carlson's,
Lowell
right?
Street. There was
on Lowell
Carlson's,
Street.
Yes.
Carlson's was a big,
Florida.
Houses
Carlson's,
and
yeah.
floors.
Yeah.
But they specialized in specialty bouquets and
yeah, they were more
Cut flowers.
florist.
but they had
Corsage.
greenhouses.
Yeah, he had greenhouses there, yeah.
he did, yeah.
By Fisk School, there was greenhouses.
Yeah,
Where were those?
Porter.
Porter.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and right down near I call it the center playground, down there were greenhouses, and the guy used to grow tomatoes and cucumbers. Porter
Brothers of
Brothers.
Wilson, was it?
Porter Wilson.
If you came down Park Drive from Waltham Street, and you get to where the
Oh, yeah,
playground
no,
starts,
there were
to
greenhouses
the right.
there.
Yeah.
But in my day, because I grew up there in the 50s, it was the Jacksons greenhouses, and they were growing African violets and selling them to Woolworths. You know, trucks would come in and they'd
Well, that's,
distribute them to.
and I worked for the Millicans at Lexington Gardens when I was a
Oh,
kid.
okay, sure.
And they had to deal with Woolworths. Woolworths would take the plants on consignment. They'd bring a truck full of stuff in, put it there every Tuesday, whatever day of the week and they would sell it. And what they didn't sell, they would pick up
Take back.
the next week, bring it back to the greenhouse, regrow it, get it back out of it. That was before they became retail,
Right.
you know.
Right.
And the Woolworths was where CVS is today.
Oh, it's Woolworths. They went to Woolworths everywhere, but
Yeah.
the Woolworths in town was like right opposite Waltham Street.
Right.
What other shops, Paul, your family had a store in the center of town, but what other shops do you remember patronizing while you were growing up?
Clothing, Reedy's Men's Store. You mean
Yeah,
that
yeah.
kind of?
I mean, there were no
Bateman's.
malls when
And
you
then
folks grew up. so-
eventually Mayenz's,
Mayenz's, right?
Country Flair for the ladies.
Bakers.
Yeah.
Bakers. Yeah.
Bateman's.
There were a
Bateman's.
couple of ladies shops, I'm not, besides Country Flair.
Laura Lane? or was
Laura
that-
Lane,
Laura
yeah,
Lane, yeah,
that was,
Laura.
yeah.
Yeah. And there were hardware stores in the center.
Several.
Lawrence.
Lawrence, yep. Several hardware stores, probably so.
And then in the central block, before it burnt down, there would be Rudd's Market, and there would an insurance company. I think it was Neil, but I'm not positive.
Yeah.
In one or two, a liquor store.
Well, Giroux's Real Estate was there too.
Yeah.
Giroux had that
Giroux.
building.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, that's right.
And that was a three-story building,
Yes,
as was the one where,
Hunt building.
the Hunt building.
right.
And
Hunt
as
building
was the
made of
bank, the savings
masonry.
A
bank.
number of them were.
Bricks or something.
So the
Bricks.
zoning is kind of changed quite a bit over time, and I think they're probably
The bank took the third
edging
floor
back.
off.
Yeah.
That's right. Well, there was a real interest. I used to go, I grew up on Clark Street. I went hang at Hancock School. Kids lived in the apartments in the central block, uptown. You go up the back set of stairs, And
Sure.
the second and third floor, I guess, were
Residential.
just residential apartments. And
Yeah.
kids grew up there and came to Hancock School.
And there were apartments all across the street on the second floor, over,
Like where Smith's Paper Store was?
no, where
On the depot side.
Depot side.
Oh, on the depot side.
No. Oh, on Waltham, on Mass Ave, sort of from the movie theater to
Oh,
Muzzy
yes,
Street.
Yes, those were
Well, I think people are still living.
I think
There are
so.
still apartments
Yeah.
up in
I think
there.
Yeah.
Right, above Wales Coffee Shop.
Yeah,
Shop.
yeah,
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, those are
That
still
stationary.
yeah.
Any particular teachers or school personnel that kind of really stick in your mind that were instrumental? You see that there's quite a few. I think in those days it was their career and they stayed in one place. So they worked for the Lexington Public Schools for their entire educational career. They might have kind of worked their way up through the ranks, but looking
Wilbur
at
Cheever,
Cheever and
Yeah,
then
I would,
English teacher, right?
English teacher.
yeah, I would agree
He,
with that.
I could, I only had him once, 1 year. He was such an outstanding teacher. I don't know why he was there. He should have been in some college teaching. He
Who
could
was that?
motivate kids.
Mr.
Cheever.
Cheever.
Right, yeah.
He wrote a book, 10 Days to a More Powerful Vocabulary, and we had to use that. And one of the things I used it the other day, I was playing Wordle, and one of these words came up that I didn't know what it was. So I looked it up, and it was a word I didn't know. And so one of Mr. Cheever's things in this book was, if you got a new word, you were to use it 3 times that day.
So you
And
remember.
you'd
I
always
did remember
remember.
it. Then I used the word.
Yeah, I can
remember.
vouch for that. He used the word 3 times, maybe more that day.
Oh, the Wordle word?
Yeah.
What was that Wordle word? Do you remember?
I don't remember.
You don't remember now.
Yeah, it was midgetry.
Mid.
It can only be
Midge.
5
Midge.
letters.
It was midge.
5 letters,
Oh,
M-I-D-G.
right, I remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a Scottish
Mr. Cheever
league.
was not,
a
could be a
Scottish
little
flea?
cruel though, because,
Careful.
were there
When I-
many rulers in those
well,
days?
I was not a strong speller, and he had this every week, a test for this book, vocabulary. And while I was in the operator, he gave me an F on my paper, and he said, "So Solly, alla semi Mikado flunky test."
Now, there's something he remembered a few years
He was unbelievable.
Completely
If,
not
if you had a
PC.
big
On
test
PC
today,
today.
No.
that would be back on your desk tomorrow morning, completely corrected. Well, they stayed up all night, but comments for every single kid,
How many kids would each class tend to have? 20, 25? I mean,
25.
would you have as many as 30 in a class?
I don't even remember, we had, because we went to
25.
different courses,
We moved.
we had a
between
homeroom.
classes.
You had a homeroom, and I have no idea how many were in a homeroom.
Don
but Jenny-
Gillespie was also,
Don Gillespie
Yes,
He
for
was,
must have
many-
been fairly new at that time, was he? Or,
absolutely.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
must have been, because
He
he
just
taught into the
come-
70s, I
right.
think, in
Yeah.
Lexington.
At least, yeah. And then you had Mr. Ziggy, and he ended up being a vice principal or principal.
he was a
through his
math
career.
teacher.
Yeah.
Not-
And then the two phys ed, Doris Levitt, she was there forever.
Yes.
Forever.
And Doc Abel.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. Did you mention it, Ziggian?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Moyle,
Mr. Moyle.
Mr. Moyle, and Jenny Benevich, of course. Everybody knew Jenny Benevich.
Where did she
Could you
English.
spell her name?
Well, that was the trick.
Wordly.
If you couldn't spell her name, you flunked the course, no.
I have a strong memory of Helen McIntyre.
Miss
who we-
McIntyre.
Miss McIntyre.
Yeah, Miss
What was
McIntyre.
her class?
Oh, it was American
American
Problems and American History, and she really inspired people to think out of the box in terms of politics. And she'd had field trips that we'd go into Boston on a Friday night to hear a lecture. And I think one of the groups, I can't remember the name, someone could help me, But I think it was a right-wing conservative, like the John Birch Society. It was not, but, oh, God.
We went in there one time, and it was the opposite side of John Birch.
Right.
Yes.
Some real wild liberal.
Oh, okay,
And-
okay.
One of my classmates who since passed, but a friend of Dave's and mine, Bruce Aller, got up, and he took on this lecturer. He wouldn't stop. Oh, God.
Well, during your high school years, the Korean War was ongoing, 52, 53.
Yeah.
Was there a lot of discussion amongst your history classes, your American studies classes, about the conflicts that America was in at the time? It didn't phase. I mean, there was no draft. If you were coming out of high school in 1953.
We knew people who went in the military, but I do know in the old high school, I'm trying to think whether it was a chem class. No, it would have been in the new high school physics class, because there was a young man that had gone to Korea, who was back doing a PG course in the high school. And he had graduated, but he needed that. He wanted to go to college to do something, and he needed that physics course. So I don't know whether there were others, but I do know him. He lived over on Woburn Street.
You think he perhaps left high school to do military service
He
and then
might
returned?
have, but I know that they called it a PG course in physics because he needed it. So
Did you have any adults in your families serve in World War II? Aunts, uncles, parents, perhaps, or had any knowledge of neighbors and all that were in World War II and coming back in
My mother's
45?
brother
Yeah, of course.
was a paratrooper in OSS.
Do you recall when the war ended, either VE Day or VJ Day, what celebrations or what excitement transpired across the community?
Yeah, it's a good question.
I don't remember it across the community
Yeah.
per se, but I was at summer camp, and I remember this had to have been in August, and we were
That would be
routed
VJ.
at 6 o'clock in the morning for a flag ceremony around whatever, the baseball diamond or whatever it was. And going back to your earlier question, I had an uncle who was in the Second World War, and he was a colonel and actually a selectman at the same
So
time.
he lived in Lexington.
Yeah.
And he was your father's brother?
Yes, Albert, yeah. He was a selectman for a number of years. So,
What were celebrations like in Lexington? I mean, you had Patriots Day in
big deal.
big deal
big deal.
in April, and big parades, a lot of military.
Mm-hmm.
Hanscom Air Base was active in the 50s, after the war and during the war perhaps, and into the 50s.
We were able to get a window in, the Hump Building was still around at that time, and one of the luxuries was that for the family to witness the parade from a terrific view site was one of the windows on the second or third floor.
Did any of you ever march in bands or any other groups like
Scouts.
during the...
I certainly did, but it was after high school. Because I was very active with Campfire Girls. So with the early morning parade, boy, did we do it.
And the brownies?
Well, it was they were bluebirds, bluebirds and Campfire Girls. But when they were really little, we just went from Muzzy. But then they went from Adams when they got older.
The full route.
I think the furthest it went was from like where Toyota is now, right? It used to go.
Yeah, we used to
There was big parades in those
yeah,
days.
they were
Big
big parades.
Were there celebrations on the 4th of July? The Lions claim the carnival started for them in the 50s. Was there a carnival in your day? Did the town ever see a circus come in, or other carnivals during the summer season?
I remember
You've really shared quite a few of your memories with us, and we're our time is kind of drawing near, so we're trying to...
Time always goes fast with
Yeah.
these groups.
Oh, it's fun.
When you're having fun.
Do you have anything, I want to close with what I took out of your yearbook that is somewhat telling, and I guess to get any reaction you folks might have to it before, if you have any other recollections that have come to your mind.
Well, Peter was asking earlier if there was any thoughts during the Korean War at that time. And I can remember having big discussions about why we couldn't go over the 32nd parallel.
Oh,
Remember
where
that?
they settled
I mean,
North and South
it was
Korea
crazy.
line.
I mean, how do you win a war?
Yeah, that was one of the first wars that everybody decided not to win,
Yeah.
regardless of what side you were on.
Yeah.
However, at the end of the yearbook, it says, an end of an era yearbook. Guides by the principles we learned in our school life, we can guarantee with President Eisenhower that the future shall belong to the free. It was kind of interesting that that was your closing. Your whole yearbook was about your being the last graduating class from the 1475 Mass Ave building, though I found it interesting. There was no picture of the building in the
Lois
yearbook.
was the editor.
Lois was the editor. Any closing thoughts on being the last graduating class of the old high school?
We were very lucky.
We were
Very
lucky,
lucky.
yeah.
We grew up in
That's,
a wonderful, innocent bubble of time.
In La La Land, too. I
In
always
La
call
La
Lexington,
Land.
Planet Lexington, La La Land.
Yeah.
'cause
Right.
It really is a wonderful community to
And-
grow up in, even today.
By the
Yeah.
same token, I think it's so much richer and diverse and interesting today. I know some people find it very threatening. I think it's wonderful. I'd like to think that we're an inclusive community and diverse and interesting.
We're all of that.
Yeah.
It has grown as the world around us has grown, as far as what it has to offer, and to be much more inclusive.
yeah.
Very, very lucky to be here.
I think in the 50s it reflected what life was like in the 50s.
Well, it was a more innocent time because we didn't know everything so quickly.
Everything, we didn't know
It's in-
anything.
Well,
As communication opportunities expanded,
Yeah.
and like in this day and age with the internet and all,
Yeah, I mean-
ignorance was bliss, and we're all we're all evident of that.
yeah, it was-
No TV until we were kind of in high school.
And then you could go to Ross TV and get yourself a TV.
Right.
What was the Paul? Do you remember the year the first TV showed up at your shop, your dad's
Yeah,
shop?
1948,
Oh, okay.
I think.
And
yeah.
the problem then was, if you bought a TV in 1948, there were no stations. What were you going to watch?
Right, right.
Yeah, I don't remember.
Yeah, I can remember it was the Shaman Indian. Shaman Bank,
Right, yeah.
they ran
The
a
logo.
test pattern of the Indian all day long.
Yes.
Oh, that's funny. I didn't remember.
My dad used to close the major part of the furniture store and have I think a boxing match like Joe Louis and Walcott.
Oh, sure.
And he would invite town leaders or friends or something, and that whole thing, the whole store was turned into an auditorium for a couple of nights.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was the place to be on a Saturday night, watching a fight at Paul Ross at Ross Radio.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all very much. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as Peter
It's
and I
been
have
great
enjoyed
fun.
it.
Thank you.
It's been
Thank
great.
you.
And this is 53, so you've got a big year coming up next year, I guess. Huh?
70th.
So good for you. Congratulations.
Reunion.
And we'd like to thank our viewers, too, for joining us on this great interview. We're hoping to actually institute interviewing more high school class graduations, some significant anniversaries.
Are we the first group?
You
that-
are. So you're now the first, Paul.
There we go.
We're trying to find some of those folks who are on the butt wall. So if you ever come across them, let us know.
Died of blood
I
They
could
all
probably
died.
name you some.
So thank you all for joining us, and stay tuned for some more interesting conversations.
That'd be great.
Thanks, folks.
Great.